"Don't bring the baby. It'll ruin the photos," my sister said. My dad chimed in, "We want nice pictures this year." I stayed quiet. That night, I took back every gift from under their tree. I, 32M, stayed silent when they told me to leave my daughter behind. But that night, I made sure they understood what family really means. The words hung in the air like frost, cold and cutting. My sister said at first, "Don't bring the baby, it'll ruin the photos." Then my dad backed her up, saying they wanted nice pictures this year. Nice pictures. As if my 6-month-old daughter was some kind of blemish on their perfect holiday portrait. I stood there in their living room, my wife beside me holding our daughter, and I said nothing. I just nodded. My wife's hand found mine and squeezed hard. She knew. She always knew when I was about to explode. But I kept it together. I smiled. I said we understood. I said we'd figure something out. The drive home was silent except for my daughter's occasional coos from the back seat. My wife finally spoke when we pulled into our driveway. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, but we both knew that was a lie. I carried our sleeping daughter inside and laid her in her crib, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. She was perfect. Every single part of her was perfect. My wife went to bed around 10. She was exhausted. Our daughter still wasn't sleeping through the night. But I stayed up. I sat in the darkness of our living room and thought about everything. About how my sister had 3 kids of her own. About how those kids were always front and center in every family photo. About how my dad had dozens of pictures of them on his walls, but hadn't even asked to take one with my daughter since she was born. Around midnight, I made a decision. I got in my car and drove back to my parents' house. I still had my key from when I lived there years ago. My dad never asked for it back. The house was dark when I arrived, everyone asleep. I let myself in quietly, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might wake them. But they didn't stir. Their Christmas tree stood in the corner of the living room, lights twinkling on a timer. Underneath, it was a mountain of wrapped presents. I'd spent over $2,000 on gifts this year. For my dad, I'd bought the expensive fishing reel he'd been eyeing for months. For my mom, a designer handbag she'd mentioned wanting. For my sister, I'd gotten a high-end camera because she was always complaining about needing better equipment for her Instagram. For her kids, I'd bought everything they'd asked for and more: gaming systems, tablets, toys. I started loading everything into my car. Trip after trip, I carried every single gift I'd brought to that house. The wrapped boxes, the bags, all of it. My back hurt by the time I finished, but I didn't care. When I was done, the space under their tree looked sparse. Sad. Good. I drove home and unloaded everything into our garage. My wife found me there at 2 in the morning, sitting on the concrete floor surrounded by wrapped presents. She asked what I'd done. I told her everything. I expected her to be angry, to tell me I'd gone too far. Instead, she sat down next to me and put her head on my shoulder. She said it was about time someone stood up to them. Christmas morning came. My phone started ringing at 7. My sister. I didn't answer. Then my mom. Then my dad. 15 missed calls by the time I finally picked up around 9. My dad was furious. He demanded to know where I was and what I'd done with the gifts. I told him calmly that I'd taken back what was mine. He sputtered, asking what I meant. I explained that since my daughter wasn't welcome at their Christmas celebration, neither were my gifts. If she was going to ruin their photos, then my presents would ruin their morning. He went silent for a long moment. Then he said I was being ridiculous and childish. I asked him if excluding a 6-month-old baby from Christmas was mature. He didn't have an answer for that. He just told me to bring everything back. I said no. My sister called next. She was crying, saying her kids were devastated. I felt a twinge of guilt at that. It wasn't their fault their mother was cruel. But I pushed it down. I told her I was sorry her kids were upset, but maybe she should think about that before excluding her niece from the family. She started yelling then, calling me selfish and spiteful. I hung up. My mom called last. Her voice was quiet, measured. She said I'd made my point and asked if we could talk about this like adults. I told her there was nothing to talk about until they apologized to my wife and daughter. She said I was overreacting, that it was just about the photos looking cluttered with a baby. I asked her if she realized how that sounded. She went quiet. Then she said my sister had worked hard planning this Christmas and just wanted everything to be perfect. I told her that family should be more important than perfect photos, and until they understood that, they wouldn't be getting anything from me. The days after Christmas were strange. My extended family started reaching out. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Some took my side, saying my dad and sister had crossed a line. Others thought I'd gone nuclear over something small. My wife's family was entirely on our side. Her mother actually laughed when we told her what happened and said she wished she'd done something similar years ago when her in-laws treated her poorly. 3 days after Christmas, my mom showed up at our door. She didn't call first, just appeared with a casserole dish and red eyes. My wife answered and invited her in. My mom asked to hold her granddaughter. My wife handed her over, and I watched my mom's face crumple as she held the baby. She said she was sorry. She said she'd been so focused on keeping my sister happy that she didn't think about how cruel it was. My sister had always been sensitive about being the center of attention, even as a kid, and my mom had spent decades managing her moods. I asked why my sister's feelings mattered more than my daughter's inclusion. My mom didn't have a good answer. She just kept apologizing, tears running down her face. She said my dad was too proud to come, but that he felt terrible. She asked if we could do Christmas over properly this time, with everyone included. I told her I'd think about it. Update 1. A week passed before I made my decision. My wife and I talked it through multiple times. She said she'd support whatever I chose, but she also said she needed to know my family wouldn't treat our daughter as an afterthought again. I agreed. That was the bare minimum requirement. I called my mom and said we'd do a second Christmas gathering, but only if certain conditions were met. First, my sister had to apologize directly to my wife and acknowledge why what she said was hurtful. Second, my dad had to apologize to both of us. Third, we'd take family photos that included everyone, especially our daughter. And fourth, if anyone made one comment about her ruining anything, we'd leave immediately and they wouldn't see us again for a long time. My mom agreed to everything. She said she'd talk to my dad and sister. I told her I wouldn't return any of the gifts until after the apology. Those presents would serve as collateral for their good behavior. 2 days later, my sister called. Her voice was tight, controlled. She said she wanted to apologize for what she'd said. I waited, letting the silence stretch. She continued, saying she'd been stressed about hosting and had spoken without thinking. She said she didn't actually think my daughter would ruin anything. She just wanted the photos to look professional. I pointed out that professional photographers work with babies all the time. She went quiet. Then she said she was jealous. That surprised me. I asked what she meant. She explained that everyone had been fawning over my daughter for months, and she felt like her own kids were being overlooked. She said she knew it was stupid and selfish, but she'd wanted one event where the attention wasn't split. I told her I understood feeling overlooked, but taking it out on a baby was wrong. She agreed. She said she'd apologize to my wife in person. My dad never called. That stung more than I wanted to admit. My mom said he was coming around, but needed time. I told her time was running out. The second Christmas gathering was scheduled for the following Saturday. My wife was nervous. She asked what would happen if things went badly. I told her we'd leave and never look back. She nodded, holding our daughter close. We arrived at my parents' house around noon. My sister's car was already there. When we walked in, the atmosphere was tense. My sister approached us immediately. She looked tired, older somehow. She apologized to my wife, saying she was sorry for being insensitive and cruel. My wife accepted the apology, but didn't smile. She just said she hoped it wouldn't happen again. My sister said it wouldn't. My dad was in the kitchen. He looked up when I walked in, but didn't speak. I stood there, waiting. Finally, he said he was sorry for going along with my sister's request. He said he should have spoken up and that my daughter was always welcome in his home. It wasn't the most heartfelt apology, but it was something. I accepted it. We took photos that afternoon. Lots of them. My daughter was fussy and cried during a few, but my mom just laughed and said that's what babies do. My sister actually helped my wife calm her down at one point, making silly faces until our daughter giggled. It felt strange, almost normal. After the photos, I brought in all the presents from my car. My sister's kids lit up. They tore into their gifts with the kind of wild enthusiasm only children have. My sister watched them, then looked at me. She said thank you. I nodded. Dinner was awkward, but not hostile. My dad asked about work. My mom asked about my daughter's sleep schedule. My sister talked about her photography business. We all pretended the past 2 weeks hadn't happened, and maybe that was for the best. As we were leaving, my mom pulled me aside. She said she was proud of me for standing up for my family. She said she should have done better, and she'd make sure nothing like this happened again. I told her I hoped so. Update 2. The months that followed were better. Not perfect, but better. My parents visited more often. always making sure to spend time with my daughter. My dad even started calling her by name instead of just the baby. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. My sister and I maintained a careful distance. We were cordial at family events, but didn't talk much otherwise. Her kids adored my daughter, which helped. They'd ask to hold her and play with her, treating her like a living doll. My wife and I supervised closely, but it was sweet to watch. Then, in March, something shifted. My sister invited us to her son's birthday party. She specifically mentioned that she'd love for my daughter to be in the photos. My wife raised an eyebrow when we got the invitation. I told her it might be a peace offering. We decided to go. The party was at one of those indoor play places, chaos and screaming children everywhere. My daughter was still too young to participate in most activities, so my wife and I took turns holding her and chasing after our nephews. At one point, my sister came over with her camera. She asked if she could take some photos of my daughter. I said yes. She spent almost 20 minutes photographing my daughter from different angles, making faces to get her to smile. When she showed me the results, I was stunned. They were beautiful, professional quality shots that captured my daughter's personality perfectly. My sister said she'd edit them and send me the files. She did, along with a note saying she was sorry again and that she wanted to do better. I showed the photos to my wife. She cried. Not sad tears, but relieved ones. She said maybe things really were changing. But I stayed cautious. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal overnight. In June, my parents announced they were planning a big family vacation for the following summer. A beach house rental, a whole week together. My dad said he wanted everyone there, especially his grandkids. All of them, he emphasized, looking at me. I said we'd think about it. My wife was hesitant. A whole week trapped in a house with my family sounded overwhelming. But my daughter was getting older, more aware. She deserved to know her grandparents, her aunt, her cousins. We tentatively agreed. The vacation was still months away, but knowing it was coming made every family interaction feel like a test run. Would they really include my daughter? Would my sister revert to old behaviors? Would my dad actually engage, or would he just tolerate her presence? One Sunday in August, we all gathered at my parents' house for a barbecue. My dad was grilling, my mom was fussing over sides, and my sister's kids were running wild in the backyard. My wife and I sat on the porch, my daughter on a blanket between us. She was almost a year old now, babbling and trying to crawl. My dad came over with a plate of food. He sat down next to us, watching my daughter. Then he said something that surprised me. He said he'd been thinking a lot about last Christmas. He said he understood now why I'd been so angry. He said when I was born, his own father had made some comment about not wanting to deal with a crying baby at family events, and my dad had been furious. He'd forgotten that feeling until I took those gifts. I asked why he didn't stand up for my daughter then if he understood. He said pride and habit. He'd always deferred to my sister to keep the peace, and he'd fallen into that pattern again. He said he was trying to do better. I believed him. My sister joined us a few minutes later. She watched my daughter attempt to crawl and said she remembered when her oldest was that age. She said it goes by fast and that I should soak it all in. Then she asked if she could babysit sometime. My wife and I exchanged a glance. I said maybe. Things weren't perfect. They probably never would be. But they were better. My family was learning that my daughter wasn't optional, wasn't a footnote. She was mine, she was family, and she mattered just as much as anyone else. The vacation next summer would be another test. But I felt more confident now. If they crossed the line again, I'd handle it. But I didn't think they would. They'd learned their lesson. Sometimes people need a wake-up call to realize what they're losing. Taking back those gifts was mine to them. Harsh, maybe, but effective. My daughter started crawling for real that afternoon, right there on my parents' porch. Everyone gathered around, cheering her on. My dad filmed it. My sister took photos. My mom cried happy tears. And I realized that this messy, imperfect, complicated family was worth fighting for. But only if they fought for us too. They were. Finally, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot to us.